Hi, my name is Rayosha Huffman, and today in this video, we are going to be talking more so about FBAs and just a little bit about FAs because I want to be able to compare and contrast them and state the reason why I rather do a FBA or why rather I like FBAs over FAs. But I'm going to give a little bit of detail about myself before we jump into that. Currently, I work at a clinic called Bridgeway ABA Therapy, located in Montgomery, Alabama, and I have been working in that clinic for almost 2 years now. And it's mainly just a clinical setting, but we do have some clients in the natural environment, which is one client that I go see. So I do both clinical and naturalistic for this company that I've been working for. The company that I work for is a small private company, so we have about 15 employees and about 22 kiddos. So we don't have this big fancy establishment, but we do our jobs to get what needs to be done. So far of me being in the field, I have never conducted a functional analysis before. I have only conducted a functional behavioral assessment for one of my previous classes that I have had in the graduate program, and I have seen a functional behavioral assessment conducted by my supervising BCBA because she is big on those. She really likes them, and she is more in tune with them because she gets to observe the kids in their natural environment when assessing the function of their behavior. So basically, I'm going to jump right into functional behavior assessments, otherwise known as FBAs. So I might say FBA more than I might say the actual functional behavior assessment. So a FBA is an assessment used for identifying problem behaviors and developing interventions to improve or enhance those behaviors. And what behaviors constitute for us being able to conduct these functional behavior assessments are the more severe behaviors like self-injurious behavior, which is basically defined as any occurrence of behavior that results in physical injury to one's own body, like head banging or taking a pencil and scratching oneself. Just behaviors like that. Just examples like that constitute as one harming their self. Another behavior would be physical aggression, and this is defined as any use of intentional physical force that causes damage to objects, self, or others. This would be kicking walls or throwing toys or causing pain to others. This is physical aggression. These are things that are more so extreme behaviors that we need to look out for. Also, tantrums. Tantrums can range from many different levels, but tantrums are defined as any occurrence of lying on the floor, crying, kicking, screaming, and or in combination with non-compliance. And lastly, we have non-compliance, which is defined as any occurrence any response that does not match the delivered instructions within 3 to 5 seconds from the time that the actual instruction was delivered. So these are more so the behavior that constitutes us being able to conduct these FBAs on kiddos or just clients. So usually we conduct the FBAs when the individualized education team, or otherwise known as the IEP team, determines the student's behavior interferes with learning or interferes with others' learning. And also, we usually would conduct FBAs when the behavior violates a code of student conduct, when the school refers the student to law enforcement, and lastly, when a student is removed from his or her current placement as a result of weapon possession and or illegal drug possession, use, or serious bodily fluids. So these are more so the things that the school is looking for, or the placement that the client is looking for in order to call us to be able to conduct these FBAs, to maybe come up with a plan put in place to support the staff and to support that client. Next, I want to go into the steps to conducting an actual FBA, because on many websites, when you're doing your research, you see different websites have different amounts of steps that you have to use to conduct FBAs. But what I did is I'm going to go over the main 3 steps that you're going to take when conducting an FBA on a client. And step 1 would be the interviewing process. And this is when the IEP team goes over the behaviors that is observed, and they go over these questions in the interview on the behavior that occurs right before the actual behavior, which is known as the antecedent, the behavior itself, and the consequence that follows. And when we do mean that follows, we mean right after that behavior, not 10 minutes later or 20 minutes later. It has to be right after that behavior, and that is going to be our consequence. Step 2 would be our direct observation. This is when the BCBA and or therapist is going to directly observe the client in that natural environment to support or refute the interview information that was obtained during the IEP meeting. So lastly, which was step 3, all data is going to be summarized to identify functions of behavior. Also, this is the time to build a plan to support the client and staff. So if we are able to summarize data and the interview data matches the direct observation data, we are able to come up with that function of behavior to move to the next step to put a plan in place for the staff and for the client. But if we cannot come up with a functional behavior from conducting the interview and conducting the direct observation, this is when we need to move into conducting a full-on functional analysis. Because sometimes when you're conducting these FBAs, you do not always come up with the function on the first attempt. And also because we have those environmental variables that could affect the child's initial behavior, it's a little bit harder sometimes to come up with the function for that behavior. But initially, I want to mention that my organization typically conducts FBAs because they are less time consuming. And my supervising BCBA refers to watch clients in a natural environment while being mindful of how the environment affects their behavior. But just like I said before, we can be mindful of that, but the behavior itself still could affect the way the child's behavior is, because if someone new is watching them, they may do things a little differently, or they may act better than they normally would, or they may act worse than they normally would. So that environmental factor plays a big role in finding out the function of behavior. So next, I want to just get into a little bit of difference between the actual functional behavior assessment and the functional assessment. So a FBA is different than a FA because it looks at environmental data in addition to behavioral data, like I basically stated before. It also manipulates the environment to isolate the child, versus when you're conducting an FBA and you're watching the client's behavior in a natural environment as they naturally occur. FAs are more likely to evoke the behavior that we are targeting versus letting it naturally occur, because during the FA, when you are isolating the client in a room by itself to control the environment, sometimes you may not get to see that actual behavior if the client is in a room by itself. So in some cases during the FA, you will have to evoke that behavior, so you have to be mindful of that. And typically FAs can take days or up to more than a week to actually conduct. Is the reason why my clinical practice typically use FBAs, because FAs take a little bit more time. They cost a little bit more money to conduct, especially if you don't have materials or anything like that. But you would want to conduct a FA over a FBA when the results of a FBA is unclear, or if the overall hypothesis is wrong from doing the FBA. FAs will set up specific conditions based on the 4 function of behavior by determining which function has the highest frequency of behavior. So one thing we can say about the FAs is that when you are conducting one, you are going through all 4 functions of behavior, because when you evaluate the data after you are done conducting the FA, you will see that one of those functions is going to have way more frequency than the other, maybe even 2. It could be 2 possible functions, but you will see in the initial data from going through all functions that 1 or 2 of those functions will supersede the other ones. So in conclusion, basically, like, after presenting this presentation, I would like to learn more about the assessment part of the actual FA, because I really only experienced FBAs from doing them in class and then watching my supervising BCBA conduct them. I want to go through all the functions of behavior to determine the child's function, but I would like to see how data is taken during the time when conducting an FA, because that is not something that I am very familiar with. And I feel like if I can become more familiar with it, I can basically see more so the reasons to choose a FA over a FBA. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you guys for watching, and please leave me comments, reviews, and critiques. I would love to know how I did.